think we're going to go ahead and begin. We might have some folks trickling in. If we get like a few more classes coming in, just like a one so that's going to be really noisy. But just know that you're safe. It's like a wall to fall. All right, so just to give you a quick rundown the celebration of literary arts, and just to give you a rundown of the day, we're going to start off with our guest, and then he'll probably read for 10 minutes or so from his work, and then we're going to open it up pretty quickly to Q&A. Last time, a few weeks ago, we had a writer conference and shut down the Q&A. It was so robust and busy, so that's we'll probably jump right to the conversation. So get questions prepared and things you want to ask about the writing life or the writing process or. All right, so today we are lucky. We are going to be hosting Kaveh Akbar, who is the author of the poetry collections Pilgrim Bell and Call a Wolf a Wolf, in addition to a chapbook entitled Portrait of the Alcoholic. And his work has appeared in New Yorker, New York Times, Paris Review, Best American Poetry, and elsewhere. Just a small story. Last summer, I was honored to moderate an event by the Des Moines Public Library, their Avid series, and they had Kaveh be one of their guests. And I was a little intimidated and excited to interview a really insightful writer. But I don't know Kaveh, I only admired him from afar. So I was a little intimidated until the library told me how he got booked, which was, he said, you don't have to pay me, you don't have to give me a hotel, but you don't have to pay me or give me a hotel. All you have to do, and this is non-negotiable, is take me to Fawn's. Because you've heard so many good things about writing. So anybody who wants to spend his time or figure pizza, what's like. So to follow suit, we did something similar. We said we could offer you money, or we could buy your book. And he graciously, without hesitation, said, buy my book, give it to your audience for free, and that's what we're doing today. So after the reading, if you want a free hardcover book of his latest novel, just come on up and grab one, and he'd be happy to sign it. So, yeah, thank you, Kaveh. But I was not surprised seeing how kind-hearted and generous he was. Last summer at the library, there was a line of hundreds of people, and he just stood there and talked to them all for 10 minutes. And it went late into the night because he was so excited to talk to people. So we'll probably do the same thing today. Anyway, his humanity is unquestionable, but his talent is also as well. Kaveh is named Poetry Editor of the Nation magazine and has been a recipient of many honors, including some Pushcart Prizes. Born in Iran, he spent much of his life in the Midwest, where he teaches at the University of Iowa in the low-residency MFA program at Warren Wilson. And he has most recently debuted his best-selling novel, Martyr, to critical acclaim, and I believe last Friday was nominated for the National Book Award. So let's clap that. The New York Times calls Martyr nothing short of miraculous, and it's nothing more miraculous that he's here with us today. So let's welcome Kaveh to the stage.
Crumbling apart over here, sorry. Thank you so much, Mark. Give Mark a round of applause for making all this happen. Thank you all for being here. You guys could be anywhere, right? I don't know, maybe some of you are required to be here by your classes. And in that case, shouts to your teacher, and I hope this will be relatively painless. Yeah, my name is Kaveh Akbar. Pronouns are he, him, or anything respectful. I'm really glad to be here. Yeah, Fongs is all it takes. If you ever want me to come to your kid's birthday party or whatever, Fongs is what it takes. Can you all hear me okay? Am I projecting sufficiently? I've been told I have a very loud and nasal voice, and so hopefully, if I'm just talking to you 3 feet away, my spouse is always like, I'm right here. And I'm like, I'm talking normally. But it works out well for this. Yeah, so I'm just going to read briefly from my novel, which Mark said nice things about. It's called Martyr with an exclamation point, so it's like, Martyr, which is, I'm still sort of figuring out how to say, if I'm supposed to be it's called Martyr, or if I'm supposed to be it's Martyr, But I'm going to read, I was looking through your guys' literary journal It's called Expressions, DMAC Literary Magazine, and they were just I assume they were free. I might have accidentally stolen one, but they were back there. And I like this poem by Catherine Nickel, who I don't know, but one imagines that Catherine is a student here. It's called Ballerina. It has a nice little illustration too. Sorry, I had to rip a piece of the page to put my gum out because I'm an 8-year-old. But yeah, this poem is called Ballerina. The world hits your eyes, bright in an instant. The music beginning the familiar melody. Begin to spin as you always have. Face your reflection, your passé tight, arms perfect fifth. The lipstick is weathered. The years show. In your faded color, your chipped hands, yet you spin regardless. Your point remains strong, smile never moving. The spring against your ankles keeps you here. If you knew any better, you'd want so much more. If only you knew. So you continue to spin. The old melody, all you know. That's Ballerina by Catherine Nickel. Yeah, clap for Catherine. So you guys should pick up a copy of this. They had a couple issues out there, so if you guys, I'm gonna take this home with me and read the rest. I wrote a novel. You don't need to know anything. I'm just gonna read just the first couple pages, and then maybe we can talk about it. I'm really a poet, by the way. Like, I came up as a poet. My first 2 books are poetry. I have like 57 degrees in poetry and zero degrees in fiction or thinking about fiction. And so I'm truly just like wearing fiction drag. But I did write a book, and I'm gonna read to you just the first couple pages of it. Maybe it was that Cyrus had done the wrong drugs in the right order, or the right drugs in the wrong order. But when God finally spoke back to him after 27 years of silence, what Cyrus wanted more than anything else was a do-over, clarification. Lying on his mattress that smelled like piss and Febreze, in his bedroom that smelled like piss and Febreze, Cyrus stared up at the room's single light bulb, willing it to blink again, willing God to confirm that the bulb's flicker had been a divine action and not just the old apartment's trashy wiring. Flash it on and off, Cyrus had been thinking, not for the first time in his life. Just a little wink and I'll sell all my shit and buy a camel. I'll start over. All his shit at that moment amounted to a pile of soiled laundry and a stack of books borrowed from various libraries and never returned. Poetry and biographies, To the Lighthouse, My Uncle Napoleon. Never mind all that, though. Cyrus meant it. Why should the Prophet Muhammad get a whole visit from an archangel? Why should Saul get to see the literal light of heaven on the road to Damascus? Of course, it would be easy to establish such bedrock faith after clear-cut revelation. How was it fair to celebrate those guys for faith that wasn't faith at all, that was just obedience to what they plainly observed to be true? And what sense did it make to punish the rest of humanity, who had never been privy to such explicit revelation, to make everyone else lurch from crisis to crisis, desperately alone? But then it happened for Cyrus too, right there in that ratty Indiana bedroom. He asked God to reveal himself, herself, themself, itself, whatever. He asked with all the earnestness at his disposal, which was troves. If every relationship was a series of advances and retreats, Cyrus was almost never the retreater, sharing everything important about himself at a word, a smile, with a shrug as if to say, those are just facts. Why should I be ashamed? He'd lain there on the bare mattress on the hardwood floor, letting his cigarette ash on his bare stomach like some sulky prince, thinking, "Turn the lights on and off, Lord, and I'll buy a donkey. I promise I'll buy a camel and ride him to Medina, to Gethsemane, wherever. Just flash the lights and I'll figure it out. I promise." He was thinking this, and then something happened. The light bulb flickered, or maybe it got brighter, like a camera's flash going off across the street. Just a fraction of a second like that. And then it was back to normal. Just a regular yellow bulb. Cyrus tried to recount the drugs he'd done that day. The standard bouquet of booze, weed, cigarettes, Klonopin, Adderall, variously. He'd had a couple Percocets left, but he'd been saving them for later that evening. None of what he'd taken was exotic. Nothing that would make him out and out hallucinate. He felt pretty sober, in fact, relative to his baseline. He wondered if it had maybe been the sheer weight of his wanting or his watching that strained his eyes till they saw what they'd wanted to see. He wondered if maybe that was how God worked now in the new world. Tired of interventionist pyrotechnics like burning bushes and locust plagues, maybe God now worked through the tired eyes of drunk Iranians in the American Midwest, through CVS handles of bourbon and little pink pills with G31 written on their side. Cyrus took a pull from the giant plastic Old Crow bottle. The whiskey did, for him, what a bedside table did for normal people. It was always at the head of his mattress, holding what was essential to him in place. It lifted him daily from the same sleep it eventually set him into. Lying there, reflecting on the possible miracle he'd just experienced, Cyrus asked God to do it again. Confirmation, like typing your password in twice to a web browser. Surely if the all-knowing creator of the universe had wanted to reveal themselves to Cyrus, there'd be no ambiguity. Cyrus stared at the ceiling light, which in the fog of his cigarette smoke looked like a watery moon, and waited for it to happen again. But it didn't. Whatever sliver of a flicker he had or hadn't perceived didn't come back. And so, lying there in the stuffy haze of relative sobriety, itself a kind of high, amidst the underwear and cans and dried piss and empty orange pill bottles and half-read books held open against the hardwood, breaking their spines to face away, Cyrus had a decision to make. Yeah. So if you guys have questions, comments, concerns, joys, raptures, sorrows.
Can I start actually?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm just going to offer, you have a lot of writing students in
Yeah.
here, lit students as well. And I know that your process for starting this book as a, you haven't written fiction much.
Correct.
You said you went through like kind of a boot camp of like novels and movies.
Yeah.
Do you have some that you, like those, not the whole category, not the whole litany, but like some titles that stuck to you that were like, those are really influential, beneficial,
Sure.
film or books?
Sure. So Mark is referencing, again, I came up as a poet, and I've only ever thought of myself as a poet. And I had this story about a young man, an addict, and this artist that he meets that I wanted to tell, and poetry couldn't really accommodate it, or at least my poetry couldn't really accommodate it. Maybe a more talented poet, would be able to, put it into a narrative like the Aeneid or something like that. But for me, I couldn't get narrative into that form, and so I started trying to write fiction, and which I had never done before in any serious way. And so what Mark is referencing, I think we spoke about this last time, is while I was writing this book, I was also reading 2 novels a week and watching a movie a day, just sort of like foie gras ducking narrative into myself, you know what I mean? Like just the funnel in my mouth, like pouring narrative in, just trying to figure out how people tell stories, right? How people get their characters to walk through doorways and onto airplanes and have because you don't really do that as much in poetry, right? Like you don't have to say like, oh, this is how the person got the money to pick up the check, right? Whereas fiction, the reader needs to know that, right? Or often the reader needs to know that. And what I found in that reading and that study was that the great artists do that stuff so subtly. Like if you read Beloved by Toni Morrison, right? Like it's this incredible tale, like you could hold any sentence up to the light and just turn it around like a diamond, right? But then also, I'm getting goosebumps talking about it. I don't know if you guys can see this. But then also, like, you can draw a perfect floor plan of the protagonist's house, like, just from your memory, because she gives you those spatial details so subtly, but so precisely, right? That you're like, okay, when she turns out of her bedroom, it's the hallway to the kitchen, and on the left side, there's a bathroom. You know what I mean? But you get all this over the course of reading it, and you don't even notice that she's doing it, right? And so it was that kind of, like, architectonic, structural building that the great artists do. Like if you read Portrait of a Lady by Henry James, I have a better understanding of those characters' finances than I have of my own finances. You know what I mean? Like truly. And so, the great writers have the ability to do this in a way that I really had to learn. Like poetry had taught me how to put words together in ways that pleased the ear and could be sort of provocative in the mind. But what I needed was that sort of like architectural structure. So reading writers like Nabokov and Morrison and Woolf and Borges is great at this in really compact spaces. Jorge Luis Borges, the Argentinian short story writer. He was also a poet, but I don't like his poetry very much. Reading these sorts of titans, right, gave me a lot. Like when you read, everyone talks about how difficult Ulysses is, and then you read it and you're like, oh, he's mapping out Dublin. Like you can they literally do this. You can go to Dublin and follow the journey, right, that he takes because it's like so mapped out. Like he goes to the pharmacist over here and buys soap, and then he goes over, and it's like this very, very meticulous journey through the streets, right? And that's the stuff that I really wanted to learn how to do. I think you had a question?
I do.
What's your name?
My name is Argenio Garcia.
Argenio, it's nice to meet you. I'm Kaveh.
I know you're talking bad about me. I'm not a writer. Matter of fact, I suck at writing.
Do you write?
I'm going to.
Have you ever written?
None, ever.
Oh, amazing.
None. But the reason why I kind of want to write about my life.
Sure.
That scene that you talked about was a big part of my life.
Sure.
It was that scene right there.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, I don't think that dude ever lived that. But maybe he did. So I'm going to ask you where you got that inspiration.
Yeah.
That type of scenario doesn't happen in everyone's life.
Sure.
And so I was wondering where you got your motivation.
Yeah, no. That's a beautiful question. I was not always the shining beacon of togetherness that you see before you today. You know what I mean? Like, I've been a lot of different people, and part of my story is that I am in recovery. I've been sober for 11 years, right? And so, but that scene is, I try not to do this thing where I'm like forensically being like, this part was real, this part's made up, but like that's literally a thing that happened. That's literally like I was like, I'm not so messed up as to just be like hallucinating, you know what I mean? So like, what is this about, right? I was a fairly low bottom addict, I used to sell drugs and I was really bad at it because I was too friendly. You know what I mean? So like, I'd be like, oh, just come over, let yourself in. I'll be there in like 15 minutes. Like, just let yourself in, make yourself some, whatever. And so I got robbed a lot. And consequently, I was really bad. I was just really bad at it. And so consequentially, I was living in a house that was a lot like that, like the windows were all broken, it was freezing cold all the time, and in the winter, it was really hot in the summers. And there wasn't much left of the house except this mattress that I used to piss in every night and some books, you know what I mean? I'm not going to talk about the specific program of recovery that brought me to the shining bastion of togetherness that you see before you today, but a fellowship of people who get together and talk about, you can probably guess the fellowship by the fact that I'm not naming it, but it constitutionally changed my life. This is the stuff that I do to keep my dog and like the fancy kidney kibble from the vet, you know what I mean? Like the expensive stuff that's like $40 a bag, you know what I mean? But like my life is the recovery stuff, like I work with newcomers, I have elders to whom I talk every day, you know what I mean? Like that's the actual stuff that I do with my life. This is all, I like writing very much. I've liked it since I was a kid, but that's my life.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I hope I get to read your book someday.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's up? What's your name?
Hasib.
Hasim? Hasib. Ooh, one of those. It's nice to meet you. I'm Kaveh.
So, just a quick question. I'm from Pakistan and I'm Iranian.
I know you are.
Oh, yeah. I'm Iranian descent, so don't get too far.
Well, Hasib is very Pakistani, though.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to ask with the questions of theology in your book.
Yeah.
So, where did you get that inspiration from, and maybe even the historical context, since your main character's name is Cyrus?
Yeah. Well,
Iranian king?
yeah. You know our guy Korush. I grew up. I think saying you grew up Muslim in America, everyone thinks that you like rolled out of the womb holding a Quran with like a full beard. You know what I mean? And it's like there's a spectrum like anything else. You know what I mean? Like there are Christians who only go to church on Easter. You know what I mean? And my family was. I came to America when I was 3 years old. So my first language was Farsi, but my parents didn't eat pork, except my mom pretended that she didn't know that pepperoni was pork, you know what I mean? And so, because she really liked pepperoni, they were that sort of Muslim, you know what I mean? And so it was like always in the air growing up. But more than that, in Iran, this is a little nitty gritty, but Iran is predominantly Shia Muslim, whereas most other Muslim countries are Sunni. And one of the main differentiators between the two theologically is the veneration of the descendants of the prophet. And so the son-in-law of the prophet, Hazrat Ali, was martyred. He was stabbed in the back by a poisoned sword while saying his evening prayers. And then the grandson of the prophet, Hussein, was martyred in Karbala, in the Battle of Karbala. He was basically like starved to death because he refused to kneel before. But that day, in 655, I think, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out the date, but that day is called Ashura in Shia Islam, and in Iran, Ashura is like this profound day of mourning, right? It's like this thing that happened like a millennium and a half ago, like we still feel in our meat, right? There's no real correlative to that. I mean, maybe 9/11 is sort of like that for us, the day where we all kind of feel a little bit somber and we all, but it's not one-to-one. In Iran, Ashura is like you wear black and there's no music, there's no, you know what I mean? And this is true even in my fairly secular, childhood or whatever. Like we would wear black to school, we wouldn't watch TV or listen to any music those days, you know what I mean? Like, it's just that veneration of the dead and that veneration and reverence for such sacrifice is so like hard-coded into our firmware, you know what I mean? And it is from that this book springs, because it's also a thing that the Iranian government has used to politicize, or has used to use towards political ends, right? Like when the Iran-Iraq war that happened in the 80s, it was a really, really brutal war. It was the first war since World War I that used what's called human wave attacks, which means like if there was a minefield, Iran would just send out a field of guys to clear it to like run over the battlefield and clear the mines, as opposed to having them go out one by one to pick them up. It was the first war since World War I to use chemical weapons, mustard gas, including Hitler, who briefly saw the battlefields of World War I as a Prussian soldier, deemed mustard gas like too barbaric to use, like the most barbaric concentration camp ass dude was like mustard gas was too barbaric to use because he saw its effects on people, and that was used in the Iran-Iraq War. So it was really, really dark. It was a dark time, and to get people to enlist, the Iranian government, well, I mean, there's mandatory enlistment in Iran, but to encourage people or whatever, they would say like those who died are martyrs, right? Like they didn't say they were like dead soldiers. They used this religious language. It was a completely non-religious war. There was no, I mean, there's a religious element in that Iraq is predominantly Sunni and Iran was predominantly Shia, but it was really, after the Iranian, sorry, I'm getting like really into this, I don't know how, but like after the Iranian Revolution in 1979, Saddam was like, oh, Iran's weak, I can just like kick the door down and the whole house will crumble around it, and so he comes in, and then Iran was like so offended that they kept it going like way longer than they needed to, and so they would give, when a soldier enlisted, they would give them a key to wear around their neck, and they would call it a key to heaven, in other words, like when you die, here's your key to heaven, right? There's a character in the book who his job was to ride around the war dead, right? Like after the battle, he would put on a black cloak, get on a horse, and ride around all the war dead after these human wave attacks. And he would hold a flashlight under his face like this and hold a sword up in the air, and he was supposed to look like the angel of death. He's supposed to look like Gabriel or Hazrat Ali or whatever the soldiers thought, and it was like to affirm their conviction. It's like, yeah, you're gonna go to heaven because look, there's the angel like coming for you. You know what I mean? Like all these dying men, like he would be the last thing they saw. And there are long passages of the book told from his perspective. So I mean, all of this is in my head, you know what I mean? And then, I'm also writing lots of this book during quarantine when America is doing the same thing with healthcare workers, right? It's like, oh, we thank our nurses for their sacrifices, or, you know what I mean? As the nurses were dying en masse. I mean, COVID was an organic phenomena exacerbated immeasurably by human structures, by imperialist, racist, colonial human structures. And so we were doing the same thing. We weren't using the language of religion. We were using a more secular iteration of it, but it was the exact same thing as what Iran was doing, right? And so like, it was very foregrounded in my mind, right? Like if we sort of venerate these people and create some nobility around them. But I mean, like some of the people dying were postal carriers or, people who worked at Burger King who couldn't afford to take off, you know what I mean? And there was not a commensurate veneration for those, you know what I'm saying? And so, yeah, all of this was in my head when I was writing this, and the idea of martyrdom and like who gets to be declared a martyr and how that can be weaponized, how that can be, regarding the main character's name, Cyrus, Korush, anglicized to Cyrus, is a common Persian name after like a famous Persian king, warrior, dude. It's like a very strong, like macho, sort of like it's like being named like dad or something. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like it's like you know what I mean? Or like Butch. And yeah, it's just a funny foil to the character to me, who's very sort of squishy and self-doubt, full of self-doubt, and has these grand sort of quixotic visions, and yeah. So that was a very long answer. What's your name? Sorry, I don't know. I can't keep track of order. Sorry. What's your name?
Hi, I'm Tanya.
Tanya, it's nice to meet you. I'm Kaveh.
Nice to meet you. I was wondering, before you ever got published, what is advice that you wish was given to you?
To be patient. Also, if you have to go, get a copy of the book before you leave. They're free. I mean, I understand that maybe you don't want to carry it around, but they're free. You can. It makes a good like door jam or whatever. You know. Before I got published, what advice do I wish I would have been given? I mean, I was so hard-headed that if you told me anything, I'd be like, I'm good. You know what I mean? I know what I'm doing. I teach at the University of Iowa, and so I talk to young people, or not even just young people. I mean, I talk to emerging writers all the time, and I'm thinking about their futures, and most of them are unpublished, and most of them are very early in their journeys, and mostly what I want to say to them is like, chill. You know what I mean? Like it's a marathon, not a sprint. You know what I mean? And it's also one of the most sort of maddeningly linear things I've ever known, right? Which is to say, you put in X hours and you get Y better, and there's no real sort of like shibboleths or this one secret will make you, Toni Morrison, or you know what I mean? Like there's no like writers hate this one crazy secret, there's no short. I mean, like I used to teach at Florida State for a time, and this is when I was getting my PhD, and I remember I used to have to teach these like rhetoric composition classes, just like intro freshman writing classes. And there was one assignment that we did where it was like write an essay about something you're passionate about. Like that was basically the prompt, right? And Florida State at the time was something like 70% Greek, like 70% fraternities and sororities. So tells you something about the student population there. And so I got a lot of essays about bodybuilding, which is something that I knew nothing about. I mean, obviously, like you see what's going on here. Like it's not something I have ever known anything about, But one of the things that really moved me about those essays is that almost to an essay, they would all say like, a good body is the one thing that money can't buy. You know what I mean? Which is to say like, no one's gonna look like cut 70s Schwarzenegger, like all swole and stuff. But I guess you could get like calf implants, or would be, like the people who like go nuts with that all look goofy. I'm sorry. I mean, the people. It rarely looks as organic as a Schwarzenegger type or whatever. But they would always say, like, there's no shortcut. You just have to be, like, in the gym, twice a day, every day for, like, 10 years to look like that, whatever. And I think writing's the same way. You know what I mean? Like, everyone's like, oh, I just gotta, if only, the agent would write this thing, or if only I could find the right agent to read this thing that I wrote or whatever. And it's like, I always tell my students, like, if you write the best thing that you're ever gonna write in my class, then I will have failed you. You know what I mean? Like, the idea of me endlessly rehabilitating anything that they've written to like sort of sandpaper a 6 out of 10 poem into a 8 out of 10 poem, or you know what I mean? Like mostly what I want to say is like, it's incredible that you've just wrought from the ether that which never would have existed had it not been for you being here in this moment to write it down. Like what a profound gift that is, what a miracle that is, like creation occurring against all of the looming odds against it. And I'm so grateful that you've elected to trust me with it, to share it with me. Like that too feels like a profound gift. Now go do it again. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like that's how I feel about it, right? So yeah, I mean, my advice is to do whatever you need to do to keep yourself in the game, right? Also, just like, I mean, as a poet, there's no replacement for just like going to the library and pulling random shit off the 811.5 shelf and just like sitting down for 6 hours and reading stuff that you would never know to read. I mean, like, again, you put in X hours and you get Y better. And I mean, if anyone's discovered a shortcut, I haven't heard of it. You know what I mean? Yeah, I apologize about the order. I'll do you and then you friend and then you friend. Is that okay? What's your name? What's your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, Elton.
Elton, it's nice to meet you. I'm Kaveh.
You title your book Martyr, exclamation mark.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's going to be some religious connotation that you want to write about, but then immediately you hit them with profanities in your writing. Was that intentional?
Yeah. So good question, Elton. Thank you for that. Yeah, the title of the book is Martyr, exclamation point, importantly. The exclamation point is important, I think. And yeah, the book is full of profanity and drugs and piss and poop and sex and Yeah, I mean, it just is, because my life is, you know what I mean? Like, the same brain that I use to contemplate God wants me to put a needle in my arm. You know what I mean? Like, the same brain that I use to tell, the same mouth that I use to tell my spouse that I love them, you know, used to ingest any old thing, you know, whatever was lying around, you know what I mean? And so there's no extricating the two, to my mind. And also, I think it's a really interesting poem. One of my favorite poems of all time is by this poet, Jean Valentine, Jean, Valentine spelled like the holiday. It's called I Came to You, and it goes like this. Again, this poem is by Jean Valentine, not me, but it's called I Came to You. I came to you, Lord, because of the fucking reticence of the world. No, not the world, not reticence. Oh, Lord, come. Lord, come. We were sad on the ground. Lord, come. We were sad on the ground. And that's the whole poem. And I love it so much for a million reasons. I'm not going to get into all of them, but just quickly, like, the poem opens with her saying, I came to you, Lord, right? So we begin in this kind of liturgical, religious register, right? We begin in a direct address to God, right? Which is the language of prayer, the language of gospel, right? And then the next line, I came to you, Lord, because of the fucking reticence of the world, right? Reticence, kind of like hesitation or, you know, skepticism a little bit. I came to you, Lord, because of the fucking reticence of the world, right? You'd be hard-pressed to find a less liturgical, religious word than fucking, you know what I mean? Although, you know, Song of Songs is pretty spicy. But I say that to say, right, like, immediately she's introduced a particular kind of register, a particular kind of address, a particular sound, and then she's immediately undercut it, right? She's immediately shifted that. And so already, like, as a listener, when you heard that poem, when I said, I came to you, Lord, because of the fucking reticence of the world, immediately you're leaning in. You know what I mean? You're like, what? Because of the what? You know what I mean? Like, already you're leaning in. And I think that's really powerful, right? I think that's a really, really powerful human thing, right? Like, to get the reader kind of leaning in and being like, wait, what do you say? You know what I mean? And so there's some of that to it as well, right? Like, this idea that my experience of life on the planet is sacred and full of occasions for bafflement and wonder. You know what I mean? Like, every tree that you walk past out there when you come to class today or when you come to this thing began its life as starlight from a star 93 million miles away. You know what I mean? Like, 93 million miles away, those photons traveled to Earth weighing nothing, hit the chlorophyll inside a plant seed, became matter, right? Became something that you could put on a scale. I'm getting goosebumps talking about it. Became matter that you could put on a scale and weigh, right? Like, you can, like, weigh nothing, 93 million miles away, comes to Earth, becomes something that you can weigh on a scale, and then that predicates all organic life on the planet, right? That's magic. You know what I mean? Like, you can call it photosynthesis or whatever, but, like, naming magic doesn't make it not magic. You know what I mean? Like, that's magic, right? And so, like, I'm alive in a time when I'm aware of that, and I'm aware that right now, this second, my taxes are funding bombs to be dropped on innocent civilians in Gaza, and that there's another genocide happening in Sudan, right? And there's massive healthcare inequity within this country. And you know what I'm saying? Like, all of these things are concurrent for me in my consciousness, and I want my art to reflect that sort of, like, density of contemporary experience. Does that make sense? Yeah. Friend here, friend here, friend here again. What is it? Judy, nice to meet you. A fellow Tallahassean.
Yes, yes. So, I was a teacher.
What sort of teacher? At Florida State?
No, here.
Oh, amazing, amazing. It's nice to meet you. I used to teach middle school and high school. I thought you meant that.
Oh, I did
Before.
that too.
Oh, really? Before I got my PhD, that's what I did.
So anyway, I would like to point out to members of the audience what we're saying, but I want to say it in a more direct way.
Sure, sorry, I get a little esoteric and high off my own farts.
It's use of opposition.
It's what?
It's use of opposition.
Use of opposition,
Yes,
sure, yeah.
Thematic, I hear you talking about thematically, I hear you talking about in the sentences that you read,
Mm-hmm.
the juxtaposition. So, I guess the question I have is I think that's really important for starting out writers to understand.
Yeah.
Maybe what some patterns are.
Yeah.
Are there some other patterns besides opposition that you became aware of that you could pitch to us?
Huh. Yeah, that's a big question. Thank you, Judy. Yeah, I mean, it depends on, I mean, like opposition is like the fundamental force that holds the universe. You know what I mean? Like the countervalent force is inside the electron. And I think that the same is true in the writing at the level of, you know, syntax, you know, like having one word sort of like brush up against another word in an interesting way, to the level of character, to the level of plot, you know what I mean? Like however macro you want to get. I think that oppositional, I mean, I think that opposition is one way of talking about it and complexity is another, you know what I mean? Like just the idea that, you know, I came to America from Iran when I was 3 and have an immigrant, you know, my dad worked on industrial corporate poultry farms his whole life and, you know, I have the typical sort of like first generation immigrant comes to this country and works a backbreaking job so that his kid can like fail at improv school sort of story. You know what I mean? Like, except mine, instead of failing at improv school, I just like became an addict, you know what I mean? And then became a poet. I don't know which one was worse to him. I'm kidding about that. But you know, like part of the deal, part of the inheritance is that sense of like shame, you know what I mean? Like he bought his first house in his 50s after working for 2 decades on a duck farm 6 days a week, on various duck farms 6 days a week, whereas I bought my first house in my early 30s after having like sat around in my pajamas and written a bunch of work, you know what I mean? It's this sense of like, well shit, like what do I, you know what I mean? And I want that too, you know, I mean, like and I guess I'm not really answering your question,
Well,
but
or maybe it's just an encouragement to look for patterns when you're looking at different authors.
yeah, and also like, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is that, you know, there's one way of writing a story that is like monolithically certain, right? Like there's one version of a poem that says, I am sad, I am looking out the window and it is sad. I got broken up with and I am so sad. You know, my boyfriend is a jerk and I'm so sad and I love him and even that is a kind of opposition. But you know, like the most universal poem would just be like, I am sad or I am lonely or I am baffled, right? And just saying that over and over. Like I look, but like that's not how art works, right? There's no if I just stood here and was like, I am sad, like none of y'all would be like, oh yeah, I see myself in that. You know what I mean? Like you might, even though you've all been sad, you're all probably sad to an extent right now, right? But I mean, we all are. We're all sad and we're all happy and we're all, you know. But if my poem said, you know, my husband just left me and we used to grow tomatoes in our garden and now the garden's gone to dirt and I'm feeling so crummy and rudderless and I don't know what to do and I got on the apps the other night and I went on a date with some guy and he wouldn't stop talking about his fantasy football team and his portfolio, and then the waiter brought out a salad with a big tomato on the top, and I started crying right there at the table, right? Like that's how art works. You know what I mean? Like it's like you find the foil of this tomato, right? Like we used to grow tomatoes together, and then the tomato comes back, right? And that suddenly now we're
Like repetition.
yeah, so repetition. Yeah. So like if I say I am sad because my husband left me, you're all like, yeah, no, that sucks, but you're not going to relate to it. You know what I mean? Even if your husband has left you, right? I don't know why I keep. My marriage is fine. Thank you for asking. But it is the tomato that kind of activates that poem, right? Not the fact of the sadness, right? Does that make sense? Yeah. I have no idea what order the hands are. I'm sorry. Yes, you. You are. What is your name? I don't mean to say yes, you, but yes, my good friend with an inner life that is as vital and complex as my own, Cass.
You said earlier that you read 2 novels a day and watched a movie.
2 novels a week and watch a movie a day. Yeah, I'm not that fast of a reader.
How do you find time to still write?
Yeah, I mean, so Cass asked if I was reading 2 novels a week and watching a movie a day, how did I still find time to write? The answer is that I inhabit a very sultanic position in this world where I don't have to work that much and I get paid to do the thing that I love doing best in the world. I think that the best key to being happy in late capitalism, as insofar as I found it, is to figure out what you love doing and then figure out how to get the world to pay you to do it. You know what I mean? And so my work is writing. I've had a lot of, I used to get fired a lot, as you can imagine. And so I've had all the shitty jobs. I used to drive forklifts, third shift at a Subaru plant, and I used to, I've had every sort of front of house, back of house restaurant job that you can imagine, every sort of service job, retail. I substitute taught for a long time. I've had a million jobs. And so you will never hear me at any point for the rest of my life complaining about this. You know what I mean? The answer is just I have there are 168 hours in every week. I work for my job, maybe 20 hours of those, and then the other 148 hours are mine to read and walk my dog and think important thoughts while staring out the window. You know what I mean? I inhabit a very, very lucky position. I'm very privileged in that way. There are many points in my life when it's been otherwise, but right now, while I am living this particular existence, I'm trying to avail myself of it as much as possible and use that time, so. I know there were other hands. Hey, friend. What's your name? T? Nice to meet you. I'm Kaveh.
So, your mind never stops running, from what I can tell.
Yeah, it can, yeah.
It's like a constant stream. How do you quiet that?
Well, I found a few really effective methods to which I've lost my privileges, but yeah, I don't know. That's the $1 million question, to be honest. I haven't found anything as effective as those former methods. It's just that the costs started to outweigh the benefits, physiologically, financially, metaphysically. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't really. I'm a terrible sleeper. I sleep 4 hours a night. I am constantly working on 8 different projects at once and running around, and I don't know. I exercise, and that helps sometimes. I like sports a lot, but if I'm exercising, I'm also looking at my phone and watching a thing, or you know what I mean, or I'm what you know what I mean. I'm never just doing one thing. I'm trying to think of when it does actually shut up. In the aforementioned recovery meetings, I'm pretty present, and that helps. Yeah, there's not a high in this world that I haven't made myself sick off of. You know what I mean? Whether it's narcotics or booze or food or sex or gambling or whatever, you know what I mean? Praise, money, art, any available pleasure button to me, I press till it breaks. You know what I mean? And so, I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you. Exercise helps, I guess, but it feels like I'm sort of halfway lying to you and I'm trying to be honest. Hey, I haven't forgotten about you, my friend. I'm just trying to make sure that everyone gets an opportunity. What's your name?
Leah.
Leah, it's nice to meet you. I like your shoes.
So this is kind of a vulnerable question.
Yeah, I've been pretty guarded so far.
How you feel. So, I have not necessarily a parallel background to yours, but I've done a lot of dumb stuff. I
Mhm.
flunked out of college twice.
Same, twice.
My three kids came
Yeah.
back. I love
Yeah.
them. Doing so great.
Yeah, that's great. Shout out you.
Loved writing as a high schooler and in my youth. But I did feel like my best writing came when my world was falling apart.
Sure.
And now it's not, and that's great.
Yeah.
I can't write though. And I don't know, like, letting go of that. I really enjoyed writing.
Yeah.
And it might not be something I can ever do to that extent. And that I have to learn to be okay with that. And I don't know how.
Yeah, I mean, that's a beautiful question. Thank you for sharing that with me. I don't think you have to learn to be okay with that. I think that getting back to it is an actionable goal that's perfectly available to you. I think that there's no, I've taught middle school, high school, undergraduate, grad school, PhD, like I've taught every level of student, and there's not a single student, I've taught thousands of students at this point, and I've never taught a student who wrote their best work when they were 17. You know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't, it doesn't happen. Like, it's just not true. The poet William Wordsworth said, poetry is emotion recalled in tranquility, right? In other words, like, no one sits by their dying husband's bedside and is like, I don't know why I keep doing it. I'm like, I promise my spouse is fine. Like, we're doing great. I mean, Jesus. But no one sits by like their dying beloved's bedside and like writes a rhyming sonnet. You know what I mean? Like, emotion recalled in tranquility is like you experience the thing, and when you're experiencing the thing, like when I was out, I didn't write. I mean, I plagiarized, but I didn't write. I just drank about writing, and I told people I was a writer. You know what I mean? Like, and then now I can like access it with a little bit more clarity and a little bit more removed. Like when I started writing during it and shortly thereafter, everything that I wrote was like, oh man, I was this gloriously misunderstood scumbag and everyone should feel sorry for me because I was so great and everyone was so mean to me, right? And that was bullshit too, right? I mean, the kind of spiritual maturation that you've experienced since the stuff that you've described is going to make your writing so much better than it ever could have been when you were sort of inside. It's like trying to describe a cloud from inside the cloud, right? Like if you've ever been in a plane inside a cloud, it just looks like you're, I don't know, like the sky is kind of like whitish around you, right? But when you're on the ground, you're like, oh, that one's a giraffe and that one's a clown. You know what I mean? Like now you have a bit of perspective with which you can talk about that stuff.
So then, I mean, you're clearly well-spoken and a more polished version of what you've described your past. So do people call you out on it, call you like a bullshitter? And like, or do you feel like one?
Oh, I certainly feel like one. I mean, I think that I now inhabit a station where there's been like enough fanfare and baubles and stuff that people have like draped around my neck that, you know, yeah, exactly. I'm like wearing my like normal guy drag right now. You know what I mean? Like a normal human being. But I'm still like 12 squirrels in a trench coat. You know what I mean? Like I still feel like that. You know what I mean? And like at any second someone's gonna come up and like be like, ah, there you are. You know what I mean? And honestly, if they did, I'd just be like, dope. Like I had a great 11 years. Like no one has been paid more richly than I have been. You know what I mean? And so I don't mean financial. I mean we're doing fine, but we're not like millionaires. But like, you know what I mean? But like, you know, like I'm married to my best friend. We have a dog and 3 cats. I get to do my favorite thing every day. You know, like my life. I mean, in the macro, I would like every gun and bomb to be melted down and every sentient being to be free from suffering. But in the micro, my life is pretty indistinguishable from what I'd describe as heaven. You know what I mean? And I say this to say, like, it sounds like you're in a better place now, and the writing is there. You know what I mean? Like, it's literally, you know, I think so often what fucks people up is that they sit in front of a piece of paper and they're like, all right, I gotta say, like, all the shit that I've ever thought, you know, I gotta tell everyone exactly what it was like, and like, I gotta be like, you know, like, and I gotta like arrest the specter of global capitalism in its tracks, and I gotta like call out America for indigenous genocide and chattel slavery and nuclear proliferation, or what, you know what I mean? And like, I gotta do all of this, and like, meanwhile, you're just like in your pajamas, like staring at a blank piece of paper, you know what I mean? And it's like all that pressure can be really immobilizing. You know what I mean? Like you feel all that, and like a lot of the times I'm just like, all right, you know, if I just flip open this book and I'm like, all right, the word that I pointed to is telling, and now the word that I point to is envelope, and now the word that I point to is paper, and now the word that I point to is rest. All right, so I'm like, I'm gonna paper the walls with an envelope so that I can finally rest, right? Now I have a sentence, you know what I mean? Like, and you can do that with like anything, you know, you can go through this, like sitting right there, just like go grocery shopping for words, right? And then connect them, and suddenly you have a sentence. I'm papering the walls with envelopes, so finally I can rest. All right, now you have a sentence, now do it again, right? Poke, barn, believe in. You know, I'm papering the walls with envelopes, so finally I can rest. Nightmares poke through my mind, but I still believe. You know, like now, oh shit, like now I'm writing a poem. Now there's like a little bit of narrative, you know, like finally, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like don't try to, like when you're sitting in front of the page and you're like, I gotta say everything, and I gotta tell my kids I love them, and I gotta tell them how bad it was and not to do what I did, you know, whatever. Like that shit, you're never gonna write anything, right? But if you just start like connecting words to words, right, you're gonna start making language. And then because you're Leah, like your mind is indelibly gonna imprint that language with the shit that you're thinking about anyways. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so like it will emerge in the writing, like it will be inflected by you and your experience because you're the one doing the connecting, but you're not just staring at a blank piece. I've never written anything just like staring at a blank piece of paper without like 8 books around me. You know what I mean? Because I love to just like pull something open and be like, ooh, beehive, that's a word that I wouldn't have thought to use, you know what I mean? And so like I put that in and I'm like, I wonder what beehive will connect to, right? Do just like go grocery shopping, throw a bunch of shit in your cart and then cook the meal, you know what I'm saying?
Maybe one more question, or two.
I know that you've had your hand up for a second. Is that a hand or is that just a finger laid over a nose?
Just a finger.
Okay, I'm gonna let you close. I like the idea of bookending with my new good friend.
Do you find yourself...
What's your name?
Nate.
Hi, Nate.
Nice to meet you. Do you find yourself more influenced by the life you've led or the art you consume?
Inextricable. I mean, like one of my favorite writers is the Argentinian writer Jorge Luis Borges, who I mentioned before. And he wrote a lot about his different approximations of infinity. He thought a lot about infinity. He wrote about the Sahara Desert a lot. He was a little bit of an Orientalist, for which I'm allowed to forgive him. What was I saying? Oh, Borges, yeah. So he's writing a lot about the Sahara Desert as like a way to approximate infinity, right? Like there are all these different grains of sand, and if you look at all the grains of sand and imagine them relative to the whole desert, you can get some sort of like facsimile of what infinity must be like. And late in his life, he goes blind, and like I think it's after he goes blind. He might have been like going blind at this point, but he actually gets to go to the Sahara Desert. He actually, gets to go out there, and they take him out there, and the first thing he does is he reaches down and he scoops up a palm full of sand and just lets it sift through his fingers like this, and he smiles and he's like, I am modifying the Sahara. Right? And that was his entire like grand epiphany, right? And I say this to say like whatever Sahara I have going on in my brain, right? Like the conversation that I'm having with you right now is going to indelibly modify my Sahara. You know what I mean? Every book that I've ever read, every movie that I've ever seen, every drug that I've ever put into my blood, you know, like all of that shit has indelibly modified my Sahara. You know what I mean? And like it's like, you know, like I can't tell you what I ate for lunch 2 days ago. You know what I mean? But it's in here somewhere. You know what I mean? Like the lipids from that are in here. You know, like doing lipid shit. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like they're in here somewhere, and all the experience is the exact same way up here. You know what I mean? Like, some of them are bigger than others probably. You know what I mean? Like I remember going to work with my mom when I was a little kid, right? And I remember that for a time we lived in Milwaukee, and when you drove into the city, everything smelled like yeast. Because of the big breweries. Now they've done something to make the air not smell like yeast, but when I was a kid, like the smell of yeast always triggers me thinking about going to work with my mom in Milwaukee. And like that looms really large, right? Like when I think about, you know, the bluest eye, by Toni Morrison, right? Piccola Breedlove, like made a whole new like archipelago in my psychic Sahara, right? Whereas, the children's book about pirates that is meant to teach children about water buoyancy that I read to my niece over FaceTime, maybe a few grains of sand from here to there, it's more about the experience with my niece, right, than the text itself, right? But it's all in there, you know what I mean? Like it's all modified, there's no ability to be like, oh, this is the part of my brain that loves Nabokov, and that's how it comes, it's just all in there doing shit, right? That's my best answer. All right, my good friend, was it Zeno?
My name is Argenio.
Argenio, yeah. Gino, but no, I'd like to call you by your name, Argenio. Nice to meet you, my man.
There was two thoughts I had. I was thinking what she was talking about.
A good friend, Judy, Florida State grad.
Mm-hmm. That was way too technical for me. I'm not gonna lie, I could care less about all of the fundamentals, the people, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
What really impresses me is how you take the sacred and the mundane and put it together.
Yeah.
Because that's really how the world is.
100%.
They're not separate.
100%.
They are the same. What I guess I don't want to be offensive.
Offend me. I've got, as you can imagine, I've got pretty thick skin. Oh, I see. Well, yeah. Tread carefully then.
I'm 60, so when I hear someone talk about, well, how do you get this, and I'm thinking, when I kind of had one of those experiences. I was in Wisconsin on the Kinnickinnick, by the Kinnickinnick River, County Road.
Yeah.
Cussing God out. I think I called God every name in the book.
You and I both.
And I was so mad.
Yeah.
And I was so high. But I was so mad. I was crying on a rock in Wisconsin. And I was just hoping that God did something so I could prove that he was there. If you got that. Yeah. And nothing happened. I was so mad again. It's like, you didn't even listen to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got scared. It's like, disregard what I said.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I had those moments, and until I don't say everybody has to have those, but that verse in Psalms 23, and it says, yea, even though I walk
through the valley shadow of death, I fear no evil.
Everybody goes there.
Yeah, I fear that. I fear no
Go
evil.
there
Yeah.
and come out, there's a sort of depth that happens.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it, go out and ruin your life. I'm not saying that. Don't do that. But it's but everybody has that in their life.
Yeah.
It's relative.
Yeah, and I mean, we all die and we all love people who die, so everyone passes through it. I mean, like there's no human being who's ever not walked in despair, you know what I mean?
Right. And I'm wondering, when you were talking, and she asked the question, how do you do that or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not going to go to school as long as you did, because I'm 60. It's just not gonna happen.
Well, I did it because it was a way, after my undergrad, it was a way to keep having health insurance. It was the secret hack.
But actually, my teacher actually told me to write some stuff down.
Yeah. I mean, what you just, that moment on the rock is like, that's a short story. That's a poem. I mean, that like literally just like record yourself saying that into a voice note and transcribe it. Also, by the way, Leah, that's a good strategy for you, is to just like tell your shit, like just talk to a friend about what happened, you know what I mean? And put your voice recorder on and then just transcribe it and work from that, right? And then you're not staring at a blank page, right? It's a lot harder to dig marble than it is to sculpt marble, right? And so then then you're starting from words on a page and you can just build around that. Sorry.
But yeah, I'm glad you told her that because I was listening. But I just want to say thank you. Thank you for sharing that, because that's kind of like my hope to be able to write a book. And I was going to also ask you, how long did it take you to do that? That's a lot of words, yeah.
The honest and obnoxious answer is 35 years. You know what I mean? Like I had to live it. I had to develop the psychospiritual maturity to be able to write about it with any sort of, honesty. I had to develop the technical skills so that I could talk to Judy and I could talk to you. You know what I mean? I had to be able to, you know what I mean? Like it was 35 years and maybe it took you 60. You know what I'm saying? But in terms of like actually being like, I am writing a book now, maybe like 7 years or something like that, which is I think pretty normal for a novel. Maybe a little on the long side, but. You know, with regards to what you were saying before, you know, that idea of that crisis moment, I mean, like, I'm not Christian, but like, I studied theology, and even Jesus on the cross says, Eloi, Eloi, sabachthani, right? Like my God, why have you forsaken me, right? And what he's actually doing is self-soothing by quoting Psalm 21 to himself, right? Or Psalm 22. Psalm 22. He's quoting Psalm 22 to himself, right? Which was David writing about a similar experience, but it's like, why have you forsaken me? And then the psalm resolves itself to say, well, I haven't been forsaken, I just feel alone right now. In my faith tradition, Islam, there's a hadith about so like in what I shared, the protagonist, Cyrus, says something like, you know, in Islam, Muhammad is visited by the Archangel Gabriel, who like begins transcribing the Quran to him. And Muhammad is illiterate, and so he gives Muhammad literacy, and that's like the predicating miracle of the sort of like the virgin birth in Christianity. It's literacy in Islam, which I always thought was cool. And then like Saul seeing like the light of heaven on the road to Damascus, you know, we hear, or like Moses and the burning bush, right? Like we hear about all these people who are privy to this like explicit revelation, right? Like here is God in the form of a burning bush, or here is the light of heaven, or here is an archangel. And it's like, well, if fucking Gabriel came here and told me to do some shit, I'd do that shit too. You know what I mean? Like, of course I would. It's the silence that makes it difficult. And in Islam, there's a hadith. So like the Quran is like the album, and then the hadiths are like the mixtapes. You know what I mean? Like it's like the sayings of the prophet that came out. And there's a hadith where a follower of the prophet asks him, how near to you will we be in heaven? And the Prophet Muhammad is like, not very, my guy. Because he's like, you see me out here doing all this miraculous shit, right? Like you see me out here performing miracles, and so of course you're gonna follow me, right? The people who will be nearest me in heaven, I'm getting goosebumps talking about this too. The people who will be nearest me in heaven are the people born hundreds of years from now, who will never see me, whose faith really is true faith. Right, who are really believing, right, and not just like being obedient, you know what I'm saying? And so like that moment on the rock where you're crying out and just be like, fucking show me something, you know what I mean? Like that moment is the holy moment, you know what I mean? So many of our great theologians have this experience, right? This poet that I really love named Gerard Manley Hopkins has a series of poems called the Terrible Sonnets, where he's just like, what the fuck am I doing? Like I gave my life to you, and like it's just silence all the time, and the arid prayer where I just do this shit every day and nothing happens, you know what I mean? And like, but that's what makes it faith, you know what I mean? Like that's what activates, I don't mean to be on like a sermon now, but like that's what makes faith. Otherwise it's just obedience, you know what I mean? Otherwise it's just like, you plainly observe some shit to be true and you're doing what that's, you know what I mean? But like faith is the silence when you're crying out in despair on the rock, right? That's what makes it faith, and that's what gives it value. Sorry, I don't, yeah. Okay, I'm sorry.
Signing books. Come get your books and get it signed by the author.
Yeah, thank you all for coming out.
Yeah, why don't you line up this way?
There, you can walk towards the table this way, that'd be great.